decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. With the bearded wonder, Ezra Ginsburg, with the clean-shaven Dave Minuk, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. Gentlemen, good to see you. We're here for the next couple of hours talking everything to do with the Winnipeg Jets, with the NHL training camp in full swing. 2 weeks from yesterday will have been the season opener against the New York Rangers. So we are quickly winding the clock down on training camp, quickly winding the clock down on the exhibition season, the start of the regular season right around the corner. Ezzy, how was your time last night as an extra on WWE SmackDown?
It was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed being a jobber. It was great. I liked signing autographs, and my back's hurting a little bit from all of those chair shots. But I actually watched a little bit of it last night. I caught a bit of it, saw some of the work trucks downtown, but yeah, it looked like it was a pretty good crowd. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to put you through the announce table, Drew. I've always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
But I actually went to, last time WWE Raw was in town, I went with Hustler, and I remember Rick Ralph from TSN 1290 fame. He was there as well. So I got to see, that was the first time I got to see a live taped event. So I'm sure, it was always fun. I mean, guys, I like wrestling. Drew, I know you back in the day, used to put on the Bret the Hitman Hart costume. So yeah, good times.
There you go. Exactly right. It was a busy day here in Winnipeg last night, of course, with 33,000 plus watching the Bombers destroy the Riders. And then, of course, the big crowd.
Dalton Schoen, baby.
You know what? The Bombers are a well-oiled machine, both on and off the field. It's absolutely remarkable. I mean, I was at the game last night, and that third quarter was, of course, nothing to write home about. They were awful in the third quarter. The Riders get life. They get back into the game. You think maybe are the Riders going to pull an upset, or is this going to be a nail biter? They settle for that field goal, and then 2 plays, the Bombers are in the end zone. And then they get the ball
turnover
back.
On downs. They did that twice.
They did that twice in the course of the game. Yeah, absolutely. They did that twice. I mean, they just don't know how to lose sometimes, which is, of course, famous last words. But, they're going to be, obviously, they've now clinched a home playoff game with a victory, I believe, next Saturday against the Esks. Not the Esks. I was going to call them the
Elks.
Yes, the Elks. I sort of got caught between 2 words there. Next Saturday against the Elks. They will clinch the West final to be played at the football stadium on the campus of the University of Manitoba. So go Bombers as per usual. Gentlemen, let's talk about the Winnipeg Jets, though. Halfway through sort of the exhibition season, they've played I believe it's 3 preseason games. They got another one tonight, a big night in downtown Winnipeg with, of course, the unveiling of the statue of Dale Hawerchuk. I know a lot of people are excited about that, and I saw some people in the chat already this morning saying they're going to be down there for that unveiling of the statue. I guess
it starts at 4. Just so just people know, it starts at 4:30. It opens at 4:30, and the ceremony starts at 5:15. It runs half an hour.
There you go. Right before puck drop tonight, I believe, 6 o'clock.
7.
Okay. So it's, you make a day of it in downtown Winnipeg then. I thought that, everyone that's okay. There you go. 7 o'clock.
Yeah, go to Earl's Main and tell him Dave M sent you.
And then watch as you get quickly escorted out of that fine establishment.
Well, the old one, maybe not the new one so much.
Yeah, Dave, you got to step up your game there again, big boy. Look, what are your thoughts? I guess the to start, it's obviously you're at that halfway mark or so of training camp. What stood out to you? We know that Brad Lambert obviously had a tremendous game in Montreal earlier this week. He showed up for his first preseason game, was nursing a minor injury before that. He's off on the heels of a very impressive performance at the Young Stars tournament. Brad Lambert has certainly been a high topic of conversation. Guys that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be at the forefront. But this sort of what training camp is all about. Guys like Mikey Esimont, Saku Mainalainen, a guy who that the Jets, a veteran guy out of Finland who's had some time in the NHL, who's now back trying to make it to the Winnipeg Jets. Kevin Stenlund, the big Swedish player, also, getting some ink spilled about them so far.
By the way, every time I see Stenlund playing, I think it's Blake Wheeler.
Just because their body,
well, their numbers. I think Stenlund's wearing 28. They look actually look very similar. So I think it's Wheeler every time I see Stenlund, but it is not.
It is not. The Jets would be fine if Stenlund was to turn into a Wheeler-esque type of player, though. That would be, I believe, the expression being found money would be that. So let me start with you, Mr. Ginsburg. Which one player, just pick one. I know I'm going to put you on the spot. Pick one player who has stood out to you so far in this preseason that you've been taking note of.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Big Bad Brad. Like, I just think we need to pump the brakes a little bit on Lambert at 18 years old, guys. Like, we know that Cole Perfetti at 20 years old is a lock, essentially, to be in the top 6. We know that he's going to be one of the Jets, 13 forwards that are part of the starting lineup, right? But when people start talking about, Brad Lambert being on the Jets' 3rd line or maybe on the 4th line, I think you got to be a little bit cautious here. I think there's no doubt that his skill and speed have been on display. You mentioned the game against the Habs. Like, that game in Montreal, it was an exciting game. And, even though the Nate Schmidt winning goal was off of deflection, off of Dadonov, his glove or stick or whatever, and it wasn't a pretty goal, like, you like to see that, right? Like, even if it's preseason, you like to see these guys battling. And they look like the one thing, if anything, not player related, Drew, that stood out is they look like they're having fun again. And even though it's preseason, there seems to be like a breath of fresh air among this Jets team. And not just because of the young players, but the veterans. I feel like, at least to me, just observing training camp, I haven't been there, obviously, and I haven't been to any of the preseason games, but just watching, from afar, it just seems like these guys, we don't know if this team's going to make the playoffs. It's going to be tough. They're going to have to beat out some pretty good teams in the Central Division to make the playoffs. But it just seems like, to me, that has stood out, that, it seems like they're having more fun than they were maybe a year ago or a couple of years ago. In terms of other players, like you mentioned, Mikey Esimont.
Only one. You were only allowed to choose one. I got to get Minuk in here too. One at a time. Don't be selfish. Don't be grabbing all the names and grabbing all the players. Just one is what I said.
Brad Lambert wasn't the player that I was going to pick, but I mean, to me, it has probably been Mikey Esimont, and he was a guy last year that was really impressive. In training camp. I think, did he play one game for the Jets last year? I forget. One game, right? That was his first NHL game, if I'm not mistaken. So Esimont is a guy that I'm very curious to see if he can stick, in that opening, 13. Obviously, the Jets will only dress 12 forwards, but I mean, like, could he be the extra forward? The only problem is I know that the Jets want to have David Gustafsson in the mix this year. So I don't know if Esimont is a guy that starts with the Jets or he starts with the Moose, but Esimont's a guy just because of his energy, and he does have an offensive touch, right? Dave, you've talked about it a lot. He was a top player offensively for the Moose last year. So Esimont is a guy, even though I don't know if he actually cracks the Jets roster, he's been a guy that, just works his buns off and has been really impressive to me.
Dave, same question that as he took 2 names on. I'll even give you a little bit more flexibility to account for Mr. Ginsburg's eagerness there. Who's jumped out at you so far in this training camp?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go with the aforementioned lunch pail line that was mentioned by Joe from Winnipeg. I mean, no, it wasn't Joe from Winnipeg, although he said Joe mentioned the Moose outscoring the Moose players outscoring the Jets players. But it wasn't Joe from Winnipeg who called them the lunch pail line. I do like that name, but it was I don't remember who said it. Oh, it was Kyle. Kyle M talked about from a Dave M to a Kyle M. I'm going to give Kyle M a shout out, calling him the lunch pail line. But I really think it's actually the Moose players kind of showing the way. I mean, I think these guys are showing how hard they're prepared to work. And as he's right, like a guy like Mikey Esimont is not a guy who is taking anything for granted, but he was hungry. And one of the interesting comments he said, I don't remember. He said it to me last year, once or twice at least. He said he signed in Winnipeg for a reason. He saw an opportunity. He saw something that he could take advantage of, that there's a space for him potentially. A guy like David Gustafsson does a lot of little things. He doesn't get a lot of credit. And if you look at his game, it's pretty unremarkable. But sometimes that's not a bad thing for a guy who's relatively young in terms of NHL experience. obviously has quite a bit of pro experience under his belt already, but a guy like David Gustafson showing that he can play at the, and I agree 100% with what Ezzy said. Brad Lambert played one game, Big Bad Brad, which I thought was great by Nate Schmidt, and just goes to show you how important he is in terms of atmosphere and attitude. And like even the day before during media availability, when Kelly Moore said, "Oh, so Nate, you're playing tomorrow," and he just kind of gave that face and created that sort of gifable moment with his expression. You can see what it does in terms of putting players at ease. A guy who also deserves mention, and I'm not saying, remember, I'm not saying these guys are they're noticeable, but I'm not saying that they're playing on the Jets, right? Daniel Torgerson, the 2020 second rounder. He had the 2 goals. He's a guy who can produce. He's big. Obviously has a lot to learn. He'll play for the Moose. I wasn't actually certain if he could play for the Moose because of the Swedish Hockey League agreement with the NHL, because he's not a first rounder, but apparently I found out that he can, in fact, play for the Moose this year, because generally if you have a contract in Sweden, you're supposed to go back and play in Sweden unless you're a first rounder. But apparently I found out that he can actually play still for the Moose this year, which is good news for him. But a guy like Daniel Torgerson is a guy who we saw at the end of the year, joined Manitoba, played 4 games, I think, scored 2 goals, looked good in the regular season, played some in the playoffs as well. But he's a guy who I think is meriting notice for what he was able to do. So I'm 100% on board with what Ezzy says, though, in terms of pumping the brakes. You got to be careful in terms of getting super excited about what a guy did in one game. That having said that, though, I mean, Brad Lambert to me was noticeable in that game against Montreal simply because I wasn't even certain he was going to play. Coach Rick Bowness had said when he did his injury update on Morgan Barron and Wyatt Bongiovanni, he had said that, he expects him to play, but he wasn't saying he was a lock to play, that Brad Lambert was a lock to play in Montreal. So you weren't certain he was even ready to play. And they obviously brought, I think it was Saku Manalainen they brought as the 13th forward, just in case I suspect that it was Brad Lambert wasn't prepared to play. We don't know 100%, but you saw what he was able to do. And he looked fast. He looked crafty, as I put it. And so I think he looks like he's a young player who has a lot of potential. For me, the biggest question about Brad Lambert, because it's not about talking about Brad Lambert and the Winnipeg Jets, it's where Brad Lambert goes from here. Does he go to the Manitoba Moose or does he go to the WHL?
Well, let's talk about that, because from my perspective, because he does have that option. I mean, also could go back overseas, but that would, I think, really be a bit of a long shot. For me, I don't know what benefit he gets after having played with men for so many years in a row now overseas in Finland. I don't know what benefit he gets from going back to the Western Hockey League. I mean, I think from my perspective, Brad Lambert should be a shoo-in for the Manitoba Moose, at least to start the season. I don't see any downside to doing that. I know there's, certainly an age difference, and I know all that, but you've been playing against older men in Finland for the last number of years. Why not continue that path, especially when you've been able to perform well so far against older players at the during training camp and during the Young Stars and during the preseason? I think that he would fit seamlessly with the Manitoba Moose. Dave, you're the Moose expert. I mean, do you see a sort of a natural fit there?
Yeah, just a little. No, I agree. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to send him to the WHL. I mean, he could tear it up there for sure, but you're right. Like, I mean, he's been playing against men for years. Why is he going to go and play against junior age kids? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So to me,
because he is junior aged.
No, I agree, but I'm just saying, like, I think you're best serving him and then therefore your organization by ensuring that he is getting the best development possible. And think about it. He's going to be playing, you're not going to have Cole Perfetti there. You might not even have a guy like Mikey Esamon or Jeff Malott. You don't know. We don't know who's going to be. I mean, obviously, if you don't, you can have someone else. You hope, like a Stenlund or a Saku Manalainen. But the reality is there's a lot of opportunity for Brad Lambert and Chaz Lucius, the 2020 first, because he also is WHL eligible or AHL eligible. And I think, a guy like Chaz Lucius and Brad Lambert, I think that their development could really be served well under Mark Morrison. We see how much Mark Morrison loves developing the Moose head coach loves developing these young players. And he how much pride that group takes in the development of these guys and getting them to the next level. So, I mean, I just think that the best served for the players as well as for the organization would be for these guys to go to the AHL, develop, and then if you need them, you can always recall them. But I think that they're best served going to the Moose. And I'm not saying that because I'll be covering them all year long.
The best part, I think, of Lambert's play in that game, and just the way he's been in the preseason, as you guys know, in training camp, he stood out, right? Because he is one of those highly skilled players that just has those kind of God-given abilities, right? And he comes with obviously a lot of fanfare. Late first round pick that was originally supposed to be a high first round pick. So everybody knows that a lot of eyes have been on him. But I think what's best for the Jets organization is that, you know, he's kind of fast tracked a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to some of these other prospects that, you know, they're going to take an extra year or two, right? Like, I think, you know, Chaz Lucius is a guy that has a lot of skill. But you never know, like, how long is it going to take him? Is he going to take a year in the AHL? Is he going to take a year and a half, 2 years in the AHL, right, Dave? Like, you've seen this so many times where, you know, if a guy doesn't jump to the NHL when he's 19 years old, everybody starts calling him a bust and everything like that. Well, Brad Lambert's a guy that obviously, you know, comes with the pro experience. So it's not just your typical 18-year-old. There aren't a lot of 18-year-olds, you know, that you can say that. You can say, you know what, he's actually too experienced for the Western Hockey League as an 18-year-old. So I think organizationally, you know, it's good for the Jets knowing that Lambert's probably only a year or two away, you know, from getting into the NHL. I wouldn't just rush to pencil him in as a member of the Jets starting lineup next year, but, you know, he's got a lot of talent and skill. So I do think there's a really good chance that he ends up starting the season with the Moose.
And Drew, just let me interject quickly, because Joe from Winnipeg was nice enough to send us a link to the Seattle GM, the WHL, saying that they're not expecting Brad Lambert to be in their lineup this season. So it would look like it is Jets, but most likely, of course, with the Manitoba Moose to start the season.
You know, so entering training camp or at the end of last year, you would say, or an unbiased observer would say, there's a lot more depth in the Jets organization on the back end. I mean, we know all the names on the blue line that are competing for playing time or, you know, banging on the door at the AHL level to get into the NHL level. And there was some concern or some worry that sort of the next wave of forward talent wasn't necessarily as apparent as it was on the blue line. Has training camp so far maybe shifted your focus on that, or shifted your interpretation of where the Jets young forward group is at? Is there more optimism for the next wave of Jets forwards than there was before in your estimation? As I see you shaking your head.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, it's a good question, Drew, but like the players that we thought were going to take the next step from the AHL to the NHL are the guys that we expected to be on the Jets opening night roster most likely will be, right? Cole Perfetti and David Gustafson. Like, that's who we're talking about, right? Like Dylan Sandberg, I think we all agree. We talked to Murat of The Athletic about this last week. I think we all agree that right now Dylan Sandberg is ahead of Ville Heinola and Logan Stanley. That doesn't mean that Rick Bowness is going to use him on, you know, opening night on October 14th against the Rangers. I think, you know, Sandberg deserves to be in the top six. And then the question becomes, is Ville Heinola going back to the Moose? You know, is Johnny Kovacevic your seventh defenseman? I know Dave, you know, likes him in that role. You could have, you know, two defensemen up in the press box. Logan Stanley obviously is the other one we're talking about, but you can't have three defensemen in the press box, right? Like, you can't have three guys not playing games. Obviously, Sandberg, Heinola, Stanley, these guys can come in and out of the lineup. Nothing's set in stone, but, you know, I think that you've seen Dave is the Moose insider, so he can, you know, speak, you know, more eloquently about, you know, guys like Jeff Malott. But I mean, these are guys that are knocking on the door of the NHL. A guy like Jeff Malott, I think, has the skill set. I mean, I'm not a pro scout. I'm not, you know, Jimmy Roy or Mike Keane. Those guys, you know, are the ones that develop, you know, players in the Jets system. But I mean, you look at Jeff Malott, and he's going to have a huge role on the Moose this year. But he's also a guy that, you know, could make his way onto this Jets team. So no surprises for me, really, Drew. It just shows you that, you know, the Moose depth, for those who didn't know, I mean, is maybe a little bit better than some people thought, right? When you're talking about a guy like Daniel Torgerson, who's going to play for the Moose this year, Declan Chisholm is going to be a top pairing defenseman for the Moose this year. Obviously, Ville Heinola could be as well, but I think there's just a lot of talent. And even though the Jets are thinner up front than some other teams, I think if you do run into injury problems and a guy like Sam Gagner, for example, gets injured, I think a guy like Saku Manalainen or Mikey Esimont can, you know, be called up from the Moose and fill in nicely.
Dave, I mean, you
different players. Sorry, I should say different players, but there are more, I think, pro options this year for the Jets at the AHL level. You didn't have Kevin Stenlund and Saku Manalainen last year, for example.
Right. So, Dave, I mean, the question would be for you, as you're sitting here as a, unbiased observer,
Yeah.
is there more forward depth, more forward talent than you probably thought of at the end of last year that might be, not necessarily ready to step in at the NHL level, but getting close to stepping in at the NHL level?
I think it's twofold, Drew. I think one is that there's prospects that you have to look at and say, are they ready to jump into the NHL? And then are there AHL, really good top AHL talent that could come in and play in the NHL if need be on your fourth line? And I think the reality is that the answer is yes. You do have both of those things, right? Like, as he said, could be a Kevin Stenlund who comes up, could be a Saku Manalainen who maintains his role as the 13th forward. Maybe he's in the lineup. You've got those guys who are going to be able to play the role, and we don't know how Rick Bowness is going to use his lines. Will he balance things out a little bit more? Will he try to get a little more evened up in terms of ice time in games to give the fourth line an actual role as opposed to a cup of coffee every game and really having not much use? So I think it'll be interesting in terms of usage, but I mean, still the depth of this organization is on the back end. There's no question about it in terms of prospects. If you're looking at those young players who are coming up now, the negative against those guys, or the thing that kills those guys, is the fact that they're waiver exempt. Declan Chisholm,
Right.
waiver exempt. Billy Heinola, waiver exempt. Dylan Samberg, waiver exempt. Johnny Kovacevic is not anymore. Leon Gavanke is not anymore. Simon Lundmark, waiver exempt, 2019 second rounder. He'll do well. Remember, there's not a lot of right side depth. He's a right side defenseman. So,
and
Simon
Dave, just
Lundmark,
explain for those who are wondering about the waiver exempt thing, because we're hockey guys, so we get that. But just explain for those who maybe are curious why that's important. And that's because they can go back and forth from the Jets and the Moose and not have to clear waivers. Whereas a guy like Johnny Kovacevic, who isn't waivers exempt, most likely would be claimed on waivers.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, Ezzy, you're right. That's a good point. Sometimes we just assume that people know what we're talking about, and we shouldn't make that assumption.
I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about half the time, and I've been doing.
Well, no, because a lot of times people hear one way, two way, and it's like they get nervous about that. No, I know you do, but I'm just saying, like, it's funny because it's like that's really just how much money they're making. It doesn't matter doesn't affect whether they can be pulled off by another team, and it'll be interesting because we're expecting. I mean, that kind of ties into what we're expecting this morning, which is some moves by the Winnipeg Jets organization to become. To reduce their training camp roster, because right now it's 47 and, they've got scheduled a non-playing group, one non-playing group, you assume would have about 20 guys and, or the playing group, which is going to have about 20 guys, and the non-playing group, which we don't know what it's going to look like because they may reduce things. I mean, the Manitoba Moose training camp should be getting started next week. So they're going to need some players. So you expect some sort of moves today by the Jets. I think Rick Bowness had said that they were going to do that after the
and it's not going to be the big cuts, just for people.
No,
I'd imagine.
No, it'll just be
3 to 5 or something like that, right?
Yeah,
maybe half
a little
a dozen
bit more. Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, they're at 47. I could see them getting into the 35 number but I'm not 100% certain. Anyways, the point is, to answer Drew's original question, I think there are some guys. I just think they're a step away. Whereas the defensive prospects, like we've gone through, Heinola, Samberg, they're ready, right? Mm-hmm. They're ready. They're NHL ready. You've got the next wave of those guys, the Lundmarks. He's going to develop nicely again within the Moose organization. From a prospect perspective on the Moose, though, the Henry Nikkanens, the Daniel Torgesons, those types of guys are going to need some time. They're going to need a full season of AHL this year, maybe some more time next year. And then you can maybe, again, I'm not saying they won't get into games. There's probably no better player to mention than Nelson Nogier. I mean, Nelson Nogier, when he played for the Manitoba Moose, I think it was his rookie year, ended up playing 10, and he had been scratched. He was a healthy scratch for the Moose on like a Saturday night I think in Winnipeg. Then the Jets had a rash of injuries, so they ended up calling Nelson Nogier, and he played 10 games in that first year. So you never know. You can't. Again, it's not written in stone what guys are capable of doing when they're given that opportunity. But I just think that if you look at it realistically, the Lamberts, the Luciuses, the Torgesons, the Nikkanens, those guys are probably at least a year or two away before they're making an impact.
And sorry, Drew, just to cut in here quickly, like I mentioned him earlier, we haven't talked a lot about him. And admittedly, I haven't watched all of the preseason games. I've only watched like bits and pieces of the preseason games. But Sam Gagner, to me, looks like a guy that could absolutely, add a little bit of offensive flair to your third line. Like I realize that a lot of people have their, line combinations ready to go. Like some people have Harkins, Lowry, Appleton on their third line. I just wonder, I don't know how much offense you're going to get from those three. I think all of those guys will be in the lineup. Like Lowry's going to be your third line center, obviously. But just a guy like Jansen Harkins, I think Sam Gagner offers more offensively. And I'm not saying that Harkins doesn't have a spot on this team, but right now I would have Gagner on the third line, and that's just me.
If you're Jansen Harkins, I think you need to start showing a little more. This has not been. You have not grabbed an opportunity. You have not stood out at this training camp, and it's now been a couple years where you sort of just keep waiting for Jansen Harkins to show a little bit more. And to some extent, it was opportunity under Paul Maurice because, he was playing those few minutes here and a few minutes there and just never really got that. But I personally want to see more from Jansen Harkins because I haven't seen
more
enough.
More offense. Like Harkins is a fine skater. He's fine defensively, but he's just got to. If you're going to play in the top nine on the third line, and he's 25 years old now. It's crazy to think that Harkins is 25, but he's a veteran pro, and his rise from the AHL to the NHL has been well documented by Dave and on our website. But just right now, if you're asking me, who I think has looked more impressive and who has the inside track on the third line, I'm saying Sam Gagner. But again, that's just my own opinion.
We'll get more into that throughout the course of the next 90 minutes. When we come back, Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press joins us. We'll get his thoughts on Jets training camp so far and what's left to come before the opener in 13 days' time. It's a Saturday morning. Stay with us. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whitened my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Saturday morning, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and there he is himself, Mr. Brightside, Mike McIntyre. Mike, if I can read your mind, I think you're saying, what the hell am I doing?
Somebody told me.
On a Saturday morning. But hopefully, you're still going to smile like you mean it.
Wow, that's four or five references. I'm impressed, Drew. That's you put some effort into that. I like it. I like it a lot.
Thank you. I've abandoned my family for the past week in order to come up with that, but I think they'll make.
Drew's been writing Mike McIntyre poetry.
Clearly, yeah. I was expecting some wrestling references and jokes since I took in WWE SmackDown last night at Canada Life Center, but I'll take the Killers reference, which was the other recent event that I took in, non-Jets related event that was down in St. Paul last week. A great concert with the family. Third time I've seen the Killers, and I must say this was their best performance. They really know how to put on a show. So it was a great time, and yeah, wrestling last night, that was something else. Forget about the Bomber game and tonight's Jets game. That's the real main event of the Winnipeg sports weekend. It was quite something. It was a live television production of SmackDown, and it's interesting. I've been going to wrestling since I was a little kid, and it's interesting to see how different the production is when it's, being broadcast 60 countries around the world, millions of people. It's a slick operation, that's for sure. Lots of fun.
I assume you were there last night as a member of the media and not as a fan. Do you get, when you're there as a member of the media, do they give you any sort of behind the scenes access, or do they give you any sort of things that you might not typically get?
Do they give you a steel chair, Mike, is what Drew's asking.
Yeah,
you get to see the behind the curtain a little bit, is what I'm saying.
It would have been nice if I could have been like one of the enhancement talents that gets squashed in the opening match or something. It was my dream at one point when I was a little kid to be a pro wrestler. No backstage access. So they'll say this: the last time WWE was in town for a television event, it was Monday Night Raw, and that just so happened to be in 2019 when the NHL trade deadline was happening, and so. We were actually down at the rink that day covering trade deadline, and we were in the Matt Frost Center and kind of on in the bottom level as WWE was setting up shop. And that time I actually did inadvertently get a bit of a backstage tour, because you'd like go out just for a stroll outside the Matt Frost Media Center and you'd run into wrestlers. And it was interesting. I saw wrestlers that day. They were like rehearsing their lines for the coming evening show. You saw wrestlers that are mortal enemies in the ring having friendly chats with each other about what was to come. So no, last night I was high above. I was up in the press box. But yeah, they good on Winnipeg. Like Bombers 33,000 sold out, and I'm told that was a sellout last night for WWE. Now it's not 15,000 because they modify obviously how they do it, but I think there was close to 10,000 people there last night. That's a lot of Winnipeggers that were taking in live sports, and I put sports in quotations for the WWE sports entertainment, I guess.
Yeah, athletic endeavors. How about that?
Yeah, there was almost 45,000 people on a Friday night in Winnipeg. And I suspect we'll see a good crowd tonight at the Jets game, given sort of all the fanfare about the Hawerchuk statue. And it's a good sporting weekend in Winnipeg for sure.
That it is, Mike. Let's get into the Jets, because that's truly why we brought you on, not for your.
This isn't a wrestling show.
No, it isn't. We'll pivot to that sometime later.
Might not be a wrestling show, Mike, but I'd love to put an ankle lock on Drew. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. I would love to see that, actually.
For the right price, I'm willing to let it happen. I can be bought, and it's not even that expensive. I'm just throwing that out there. We got the game tonight. The Jets have played 3 already. They got 3 more to go. They got tonight, and they got the home and home left before wrapping up the exhibition season, and training camp is quickly coming to an end as well. What is if you had to sort of headline one story right now through training camp so far, what would that be for you, Mike?
Yeah, I think it's team unity. It's coming together as one. It's there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of teaching that's happening, way more so than in past years. And that comes with the territory of obviously a new coaching staff and a new mindset. So I just get the sense that there's been everybody's, at least in what they're saying, has completely hit the flush button on last year. And there's this sense of opportunity, of unity. And I give Rick Bowness, credit. He's come in and clearly, not just in the words out of his mouth, but just through his actions as well. Like, this is a guy who has the authority to put his stamp on the team. I mean, if there was any doubt about that, obviously stripping Blake Wheeler of the captaincy was a bold move. I mean, I found it interesting that he talked, he told me last week how he asked the players to come in early, that he heard that this was not a traditional Winnipeg thing, and he likened it to other markets. And I found it interesting, guys. He specifically singled out captains in Dallas and Tampa, in Jamie Benn and Steven Stamkos. Of course, those are his last two stops in the NHL, as guys who would get the players into town early. And he said that wasn't happening here in Winnipeg. Most of them would just show up kind of a day or two before training camp. And so he said he put the call out. Now, to be clear, the players don't have to do this. They're not required under the CBA to come in any, time before camp starts. But the players, he said, heeded his call. He was, very appreciative of that. And then, the comments after the game the other night, that was refreshing. Like, the Jets won, and he comes out and throws a bunch of his veterans under the bus for their shift length, for their lazy habits, which he says we're going to have to break. So, I think everyone's on their toes, but there is this sense of a clean slate, a fresh start. And that's been an overriding theme for me through training camp. And I think we're seeing it play out even in the competition for jobs. Now, ultimately, we'll see what the final cuts look like, what the roster looks like. But I do get the sense that everybody's being given, a fair shake. And that has really, I think, given all that went on last year, that's really raised the level of optimism within the room. Whether or not it can translate in a meaningful way onto the ice remains to be seen. But there is this new sense of kind of hope. And I get the sense that the Jets are kind of rallying together around that.
Mike, we have to talk about Triple B. Obviously, talking about Big Bad Brad.
Big Bad Brad.
You wrote about him in the Winnipeg Free Press, and everybody's
Triple H
talking
versus
about
Triple B next time on SmackDown.
I'm glad that you noticed it. I was trying to keep the WWE SmackDown theme going there. But when you talk about Brad Lambert, we all knew that he was highly skilled. Just being a late first round pick who should have been, probably a higher pick. Let's be honest, he fell to the Jets at 30th overall, but that's what drafts are. That happens all the time.
There was talk of him going back 2 years when he was 16. There was talk of Brad Lambert being a top three.
Absolutely.
Pick.
Yep. And that just shows you how far he fell, right? Like he's, as you know, Mike, a top 5 talent who went, second or third, whatever it was, second last, 30th overall in the first round. But what do you see the Jets doing with Brad Lambert? Are you in the camp that thinks he should be in the AHL as opposed to the WHL? Because we know that, these decisions ultimately come down to Jets management and the scouting and player development and everything like that. But do you see Brad Lambert, a few weeks from now being a member of the Manitoba Moose?
So, here's the thing with Brad Lambert. We know that his confidence was shaken after the last couple years where he's been playing against bigger, stronger, older players, right? He's been playing in a men's league. His numbers obviously weren't there. And that's part of why I think he fell in the draft. So coming into this camp, and it started with the young stars, I didn't know what to think of Brad Lambert in terms of where the best spot for him would be. Pretty clear to me, the one spot that wasn't a good fit was going back to Europe. So I think we can cross that off the table. He doesn't have a contract. He's not going back to the same league that he came from. So there's 3 options. There's the NHL, which I think all of us considered a real long shot. The kid's 18. And again, he's coming off a couple of seasons that were not, by anyone's standards, real good. There's the American Hockey League, which is a very interesting option. But again, you wonder, well, the AHL, that's a way better league than the one he's coming from. So if this guy's confidence was sort of broken in that environment, would this be a positive move for him? And so for me, coming into camp, the Western Hockey League seemed like the best outlet. He gets to play against his peers. He can rebuild his confidence. He can probably pad his stats. But, seeing him in the Young Stars, where he had a very good tournament against his peers, and seeing him in training camp, and forget about the one game so far. We can talk about that in a minute, but just seeing him every day in the skates. Now, he had the injury, but he's been skating on his own, and then he rejoined the group a few days ago. Seeing him out there with these elite players in some cases, he looks completely comfortable. And, again, you don't know where a guy's mind is. To me, if the Jets feel like sending him to the Western Hockey League, where he will likely dominate, it's probably good for his confidence. But if they feel he doesn't necessarily need that, then development-wise, I think keeping him on the path that he's already been on, which is playing against older, bigger, stronger men, is probably best for him, even if it means maybe the production isn't quite there yet. But then when he goes in the other night, granted that was not the NHL Montreal Canadiens he was facing, but there's a bunch of NHL players that were in that lineup. And, the assist, okay, it was a fluky assist. It went off his foot, but he was in the right place. The goal was a beautiful goal, nice steal, great shot. To me, though, it was everything else he did in that game. The speed that he showed, he negated an icing earlier in the game just by absolutely flying out there. He made a tremendous pass to Kevin Stenlund that nearly led to a goal on the power play. And as Rick Bowness said after the game, it's his confidence and poise with the puck that he never gave it up once. If he can do that, and I think he's probably going to get every exhibition game now. He's playing tonight. I see him probably playing both, at least one of the remaining two, maybe both, if they really want to get a long look. If he can do that, I think he absolutely is starting in Winnipeg, and it's just a question of whether it's with the Moose or the Jets. I think it's still a mighty big ask, and I don't want to just, based on one really good game, say he's made the team. But you do have the 9-game buffer, without burning the year of the entry level. I just think if the kid's confidence is there, put him with the Moose. If he's not going to play with the Jets, you can get him into your developmental system. He's right under your nose. You can watch him closely. And, I just think Brad Lambert, he clearly has the tools to be something really special.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press is our guest, discussing the Winnipeg Jets and, on occasion, some other topics.
Mike, I never complain when guys get sent down to the Manitoba Moose, and we have a little exclusivity to cover them down there. So it's not a bad thing. But so we're not talking about necessarily those guys, but who has jumped out at you to take that sort of 11th, 12th, 13th forward roles? Because there seems to be, the Jets obviously brought in some new names this year who big bodies, have pro experience. Who do you see as having seized perhaps a role on the, whether it's the third line, the fourth line? Right. Obviously Morgan Barron, unfortunate circumstances for him. He'll probably start with the Moose now because of his injuries, but who do you really see as kind of having solidified, or do you see someone having done that so far?
No, I do. And I wrote today about guys that have maybe slid a bit during camp and guys that have risen. A guy to me who slid a bit is Jansen Harkins, who I think's had a real quiet camp, and he can't really afford to have a quiet camp. There's guys coming for his job. Dominic Toninato would be another guy, a journeyman, who I assumed was on the team to start the year, but I don't know about that now. There's some guys pushing, and so a couple guys really stand out. We talked about Lambert, obviously, but in terms of guys that already have some pro experience under their belt, Mikey Esamont, to me, has had a tremendous camp. And Dave, you watched him a lot closer than really anybody. You know, he does some things that really catch your eye. Like I said this, I think, at one point last year. There's elements of his game that remind me of like Brandon Tanev, just the
sandpaper.
You know, right, he's the sandpaper. He's the pest. The motor's always running at full with him, but there's some skill there as well, and we saw that on display. You know, they throw him out there, and again, it was exhibition. Ottawa barely sent an NHL team, but they threw him out there with, you know, Winnipeg's three best forwards really the other day: Scheifele, Ehlers, and Connor, and Josh Morrissey on the power play. And who's the guy that gets the goal? It's Mikey Esamont doing the dirty work in front of the net. Mark Scheifele kind of joked after the game that maybe he's now permanently on PP1 as a result of that goal. But, you know, Mikey Esamont does a lot of the little things right. And I think at the very least, if he hasn't worked himself into the argument that he could make the team out of camp, he's got to be, you know, right at the very top of the list for recalls. Another guy that we hadn't really seen much of is a Kevin Stenlund and Saku Manalainen. I mean, I think both those guys who have some NHL experience, Stenlund's is more recent. Manalainen's, of course, you go back 4 years. What stands out about both of those guys is their size, but they also move well for big men. And again, the Jets don't have a ton of size, you know, up front, other than like Wheeler and Dubois, clearly. But in terms of on like the wings, aside from Wheeler, there's not a ton of size there. So Stenlund and Manalainen are really interesting to me. And then a guy, Dave, that I suspect you're going to be watching a lot of and tweeting a lot about this year is Daniel Torgerson, who, you know, burst onto the scene late last year, looks really comfortable in his few games with the Moose, scores a couple goals at the end of the year, goes to the World Juniors this year, scores a couple goals there. His Jets preseason debut the other day, what does he do? He scores a couple goals. Like, this kid, the puck seems to follow him around, and that happens with good players. And he could be one of those, you know, he's a second rounder, right? But he could end up being a guy that turns into something, you know, pretty good with a little more time. I don't think Daniel Torgerson's making the Jets out of camp, but I think he's definitely improved his stock. You know, he's looked good even in the scrimmages. I think there was a scrimmage last week. I think there was only one goal scored, and it was scored by Daniel Torgerson. Like, he's always around the net. The puck seems to follow him. So there's been a few guys, you know, from Esamont to Torgerson, Lambert, obviously, Manalainen, Stenlund. And I think if you're a Jansen Harkins, if you're a Dominic Toninato, you're hearing footsteps behind you, because there's guys gunning for your spots on the team. And as you said, Morgan Barron, unfortunately for him, missing the first, you know, 10 plus days of camp. He's not playing tonight. I think the hope is that he would get in one or both of those games next week against Calgary. Is that enough to start the year with the Jets? I guess remains to be seen, but some interesting decisions that are going to have to be made for sure.
You know, Mike, aside from the time having already been invested in him, you know, why is Logan Stanley ahead of Ville Heinola on any sort of invisible depth chart?
Yeah, I don't know that he is anymore, guys. I mean, maybe I'll say this. I don't know that he's ahead of Dylan Samberg on a depth chart. And I think if you're penciling in your starting six, to me, Dylan Samberg is probably in that top six, and Logan Stanley's not. Now, that would probably mean that Ville Heinola is not in the top six, because I don't see one of the five, we'll call them veterans, you know, Morrissey, Pionk, Schmidt, Dillon, and DeMello. I see those guys as, I mean, barring an injury, those guys are probably all in your starting lineup, or barring a trade. And I suppose that could still happen, right? Like, again, Rick Bowness has made it pretty clear that he's doing things his way. He made that crystal clear. I would not put it past Rick Bowness if training camp ends and he's decided who his top six defensemen are. Here's the six that I want to put in my opening night lineup. And if Ville Heinola, in his eyes, has earned one of those spots, I think he'll make that clear to Kevin Cheveldayoff. Now, what will Kevin Cheveldayoff do about that? Again, it's complicated because, contract status, waiver, all that's going to have to be considered. And you never want to lose an asset for nothing. And even with a guy like Johnny Kovacevic, to me, that's a really interesting, you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs guys and how banged up they are. If the Jets try to send Johnny Kovacevic down to the Moose, the Leafs would have seen Kovacevic a lot, right? Against the Marlies, like over the years last year. I mean, did the Leafs say, actually, we could really use that guy? And did they grab it? And so does Johnny Kovacevic make the team this year, even if it's as the 7 or 8 guy, which isn't ideal, but you want to protect the asset. So, Logan Stanley, I don't think the Jets are giving up on him. I don't believe they're going to try and send him down to the Moose out of camp, because I think somebody would absolutely take Logan Stanley. And I think the Jets feel they have invested a lot in this first rounder. They obviously protected him in the expansion draft. So I don't think they're giving up on him, but I also don't think he's entrenched in the top 6 anymore. And he's going to have to try and work his way back into that mix. So, they have, it's a good problem to have. They have too many defensemen that I would suggest are NHL ready right now, but they don't have enough spots. And how they deal with that in the next, 10 days or so before the start of the season is certainly one of the most interesting storylines still to watch here as camp continues.
I agree with you 100%, Mike. I think you nailed it, like your whole answer, but especially at the end there's just other players that have passed him on the depth chart, right? Namely Dylan Samberg. And then you make the good point about Johnny Kovacevic. I absolutely think he will be one of the 8, let's call it, if they do decide to have 2 defensemen in the press box, he will be one of those 8 defensemen. So I agree with you 100%. And then the question becomes, right, like, what are you doing with Ville Heinola? What are you doing with Logan Stanley? Like, they have to play games, right? Wanted to ask you about the Birdman, because you wrote about it in your column for the Free Press today, and that kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody was really expecting, to be talking about Mikhail Burden possibly, looking for opportunities elsewhere, namely, in the Russian Continental League. But you mentioned, David Riddick obviously is going to be the backup for Connor Hellebuyck. Oskari Salminen was brought in. Like, is your impression that Mikhail Burden, and we should mention he is on a personal leave. We don't know what that personal leave is, but is your impression that his time as a member of the Jets/Moose organization is possibly done?
Yeah, for now anyways, I do believe that it's done. So I think there was certainly some questions in the offseason about whether the Birdman was going to come back to North America. We know he went back to Russia. We obviously know what's going on, in Russia, in Ukraine. So there was some question, I guess, about whether he was even coming back at all. Now, to his credit, he did come to camp and he was here at the start of camp. But I think, guys, part of the reason the Jets went out and signed Oskari Salminen, I mean, for one thing, I think they're really intrigued by this young Finnish goaltender, and he had some stellar numbers over in Europe. And I think they think there's, something really interesting there as a prospect. But, the Moose had Holm and Burden last year. They got a number of other guys in the system, right? They got Jared Moe, Logan Neaton, Dominic the goalie. I call him that because I can't pronounce his last name yet. Who they just, so there's a bunch of goalies in the system, and then they go out and they add another one in Oskari Salminen, which to me, like, Oskari Salminen was not signing a contract to come play in the ECHL. He's being brought over here to play for the Moose. And Arvid Holm is a guy for good reason. We saw it on display the other night in Montreal. There's a lot of really interesting tools there. It needs more time, clearly, but, he's a guy that could absolutely work his way into the equation. Thanks, Joe from Winnipeg. Appreciate that. Even Chentis, who could work his way into the, he could be the future backup to Connor Hellebuyck. Heck, depending what happens with Connor Hellebuyck, he could be the future starter with the Winnipeg Jets in a couple of years. Mikhail Burden, we know what all the cool, fun things that he does on the rink, and he's unique to say the least. I also wonder, though, guys, and I think Mikkel Burden maybe realized this as well. Has he kind of hit the ceiling with where he's going? Like, is he nothing more than a really interesting, at times really good, but at times not so good AHL level goaltender? And, I think for him, if he does end up going back home to play, it's probably a financially solid decision for him. And I think given the logjam that he now sees in the crease, the writing's kind of on the wall. So he did come to camp, to his credit, skated the first few days. It was interesting that first 2 preseason games, he was the only guy, along with Dominic, the goalie, who was going to go back to junior anyways, who didn't dress. I mean, they dressed Holm and Riddick, and then they dressed Salmonen and Hellebuck for game 2. And then we hear Burden has taken the leave. So I suspect we'll hear some more news on that in the coming days, but pretty clear to me that this is going to be, Hellebuck and Riddick's net in Winnipeg, and it's going to be Holm and Salmonen's net this season with the Manitoba Moose.
Well, Mike, the good news is Salmonen has a goal. He scored a goal as a goaltender. So, I mean, it kind of matches the Birdman in that regard.
For sure.
So if Moose fans are worried that they're going to lose a guy who goes for the goal, well, it sounds like in Oscari, Salmonen, they'll have someone who will do that as well.
He better change his stick also, like the Birdman used to do when he was aiming for the winning goal, for the empty netter.
Did Salmonen do the Conor McGregor walk though? Okay.
No, it was much more muted than what the Birdman did when he scored in the USHL. But Mike, we should probably end the media or a chat with you and just talking about Dale Hawerchuk and the ceremony today. They're starting that at 4:30, and then I believe the ceremony gets going at 5:15. So, what are your thoughts on the way they've memorialized Dale Hawerchuk here in Winnipeg, and just in terms of his connection to the city and what he meant to folks in Winnipeg?
Well, he's an icon and a hero to many sports fans in Winnipeg. And I was lucky, guys. I got to know Dale fairly well in the last couple of years of his life. I did a number of interviews with him. I actually really got to know Dale's son, Eric, who was a professional golfer. I met Eric years ago when I was covering the Manitoba Open Players Cup. He was on the Canadian tour, got to know Eric a bit, stayed in touch with him, did a nice feature on him and Dale one year. And so through that, I got to know Dale a bit more than I ever had. And got to know the family really well. And so, like everyone, I was obviously devastated by Dale's diagnosis and then ultimately his death. And I was thrilled to see what the Jets were doing, to honor him. And I'm really excited to see the statue. I'll be down there today for the ceremony before I head over to the rink to cover the game as well. I think it's great. Like, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, when the Jets came back, there was talk they didn't even want to be called the Jets, Polar Bears, or and it seemed like they wanted to put some real True North wanted to put distance between Jets 1.0 and the new start. Fast forward to today, they're embracing the past in a major way. I mean, not just Hawerchuk, but obviously the team's own Hall of Fame, Solani, Newman, they're going to go in November in a ceremony as well. And we're seeing a number of initiatives, even the heritage jerseys, which, by the way, I wrote the other day that if the Jets are really trying to score some PR points, they should make those their full-time jerseys. And I got more feedback on that.
Nostalgia is a powerful drug.
Oh yeah. People were gung-ho about that idea. But I think it's a smart move. Like, Winnipeg is a rich hockey community with a rich hockey history, and to not embrace that history would have been a mistake. So I like what they're doing, and there's no one better than Ducky to kind of celebrate for, what he meant to this city, to this organization. And, it should be a real emotional day down there. A lot of interesting speakers, Paul Coffey's in town and he's going to speak, Chris King, and there's going to be a bunch of alumni down there, and Dale's wife Crystal's going to speak. Should be a great event, and looks like great weather for it as well. You never know. October 1, we could have been standing out there in the snow, given the state of things. Instead, it's going to be like sunny and 20 degrees. So should be a great afternoon of honoring a legend.
He covers the Winnipeg Jets. He's a columnist for the Winnipeg Free Press. He's double M Mike McIntyre, MIKEMCINTYRE.
The Winnipeg psychopath.
Mike McIntyre.
Ooh. Is this like Jeff Jarrett used to be double J and then he'd hit guys over the head with a guitar? Is that what I should do now?
Yes, absolutely. No question about it. That's exactly what I was hoping you were going to pick up on there, Mike.
Where's your sword, Mike?
I could see Mike in the press box just smoking freezer in the head with a guitar.
Well,
no,
as you asked about the sword, but it was funny last night at the show. Drew McIntyre is one of the big stars of WWE, and it was hilarious to sit in the press box and hear 10,000 people chanting McIntyre in the rink. My head was growing as I heard that.
That happens all the time, Mike. It's just when you go to the Jets dressing room, you don't hear it, right? So like people are chanting McIntyre after Jets games as well.
Wait a second, Mike, how do you know they weren't chanting Drew McIntyre, the Manitoba Moose goalie coach?
Well, they could have been doing that as well, right? Absolutely. There's a lot of McIntyres around.
There's a lot of Drews and a lot of McIntyres.
Guys, if you really wanted to go all in with the wrestling theme here, you would have played entrance music for me when I came on today.
Speaking about that, Mike, you're as a callback to the Killers intro. One of my favorite Killers songs is "The Man," and I think that would be a outstanding wrestling intro for a bad guy.
So maybe what we should do here in future shows, like next Saturday when I'm not on, maybe I should do a run-in.
Yes,
like my music will hit, and whatever guest you have on, I enter the frame, I kabong them with the guitar, and then I take over.
We'll get Hamilton on, and then we can do that.
Perfect.
And we have to make sure that Remus doesn't steal that music for your Winnipeg Sports Talk appearances, Mike. We have to make sure that they don't steal that.
I'll get my lawyers on it, guys.
Mike, thank you. We'll see you later on today. Have a great one.
You bet. Take
care.
care.
He goes. Mike McIntyre. Fun interview on this Saturday morning. Let's head to break. When we come back, much more on the Jets. Maybe an interesting topic called positionless hockey. We'll tell you what we're talking about after this. Much more to come. It's a Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
$10:07. That went long with Mike, but that was a great interview. A lot of fun catching up with
My
Mike
computer says
McIntyre.
10:08, Drew.
Okay, well, I can accept your computer as well. Dave, does your computer say at any different time than that?
10:09.
10:09. Okay.
No, I'm kidding. 10:08. 10:08. 10:08.
Do we have a 10:10 out there? Do we have a 10:11? 10:12?
I bid $1,000. I bid $9.99, $9.98, $9.97. Higher, lower. Anyways, always great to catch up with Mike. Still to come on the show in the bottom of the hour, Haley Salvian of The Athletic is going to join us. We're going to look around the NHL at all the goings on throughout the league, of course, as trading.
We have to break down the Rasmus Sandin contract. I'm joking, obviously, but
I hope you are, because I was just going to catch your mic immediately.
No, but it's funny, Drew. Like I prefer not to think about you when I'm not doing the show. Like 2 hours a week is enough.
Mutual,
but,
completely mutual.
I couldn't help the Jake. I'm not sure if you saw the Jake Allen contract come in. He signed a 2-year deal.
Something.
I think he gets more like 4 point something. It's 3.5 to 4 million, something like that. The AAV.
I thought it was like $7.5 million over.
It's 3.85 million.
Which is exactly.
But I think
what
he gets.
said.
Yeah, but he gets more than 4 million or something in the first year. That's all I'm saying. It's
3.9 million, but base and a 500,000 signing bonus. I'm looking at cap friendly right now. Happy to come across.
Dave, every dollar counts, man.
That's right.
But I couldn't help but think back to the TSN 1290 days when Jake Allen was acquired by the Habs, and Drew was critical of that, and then the salary that he signed. So when Jake Allen signed that contract, I was just thinking Drew's probably going to have something to say, but we don't cover the rest of the NHL as much as we did, obviously with this different format. We touch on it a little bit, but I just thought that was funny, Drew. I was thinking of you and Jake Allen and how critical you were of that move. But look, they have to have Jake Allen in the fold. There's no Carey Price. So Jake Allen, you have to have him. Caden Primo is not ready to play. We just saw him against the Jets. Like Caden Primo, as you know, Dave, good AHL goalie. He's young. I think he's only 23 years old, right? Or maybe even younger. But you got to have Jake Allen in the mix. I just had to get that in there, Drew. That remember back in the day, you were critical of that move.
I was, because again, when they acquired him, they had Carey Price still. I didn't realize Carey Price's career was going to rapidly and unexpectedly come to an end. But that's neither here nor there. One thing you mentioned the Rasmus Sandin contract, and I don't want to talk about the contract itself, but go back and look when the contract was announced. When the insiders went and broke the news, which they were all texted the exact same thing at the exact same time. Go back and look at the tweets of Dreger and of Friedman, and go look to see how.
I'm going to pass on that.
Well, just I'm just telling people in the audience, go back and look how slanted they are against the player and in favor of management. It's actually sort of obnoxious. And I like both those guys, but their tweets were, okay, Sandin signs, and it's not, just an unbiased tweet. It's like, this is a good deal for the player so that he gets back into camp and can resume his career. This is
it's clearly not. It's clearly not a good deal for the play. It's a better deal for the Leafs. The Leafs are in salary cap hell. I mean, let's not forget about the fact that, you have the Austin Matthews contract coming up in a couple of years. He's going to probably make 12 million, 12.5 million, 13 million. So a guy like Rasmus Sandin, I think, is pretty underpaid at that. What was he making? 1.5 million?
Yeah, something like that. It was just it was very telling, I would suggest, about the from the insiders as to where their allegiances lie. Here, look. So Pierre LeBrun tweets out the details of the contract. Dreger quote tweets him and says, I'm reading it verbatim, smart play. It's early, and Sandin has plenty of time to catch up, but he's behind at this point. For a deal that was available for as long as it was, it probably wasn't worth the wait. Is that him? Darren Dreger saying that? That might as well be Kyle Dubas and Brendan Shanahan telling him exactly what to say.
He had 16 points in 51 games, 16 points in 51 games for a 21-year-old. He's 22 now, right? Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think Sandin's a really good defenseman. And I think especially with all the injuries, I know we're going to get into that here, but on the left side there for the Leafs, I mean, Sandin is definitely, for me, one of their 6 best defensemen. So I don't know what we're talking about. Yes, he's only got 1 full year of NHL experience under his belt, Drew. But to say that, that's a great contract for the player is kind of ridiculous.
Of course it's ridiculous. I'm telling our audience and I'm telling the fans, look at the comments. Look, if you're on Twitter and you're following these insiders, look how the slant is portrayed. Look at how
It's a big bias.
Look, it's a huge bias. Look how they are parroting the line of the organization that they're getting their information from. This was one of the most blatant cases, with this Sandin contract. It was actually, it made me want, I think I was busy at work, so I would have tweeted something about, look how they're carrying water for the various organizations. But this was actually beyond the pale when it came to what I would describe as obnoxiousness.
All right. Well, I think I speak for Tico and Paulie and the rest of us who say, let's move it along.
But we're not talking about this.
Move it along, Mindell. We're going to send you out to Transcona, and Paulie's going to get his hands on you.
Anyways, positionless hockey. Are we? It's not something that's going to happen because the NHL doesn't think typically in a creative manner. Creativity is not something that you see a lot of from NHL coaches. But if it were to happen, if all of a sudden forwards could act as defensemen and defensemen could act as forwards, this is just a fun little exercise halfway through training camp, not a serious, overly serious discussion. From your perspective, who do you guys see that would fit well, say, on the back end that currently plays up front? And conversely, who on the back end could you see fitting up front? And this isn't a sort of Dustin Byfuglien back in the day tweener situation, because I know that's the name that's first coming to everyone's mind. But from your perspective, because the Leafs, you mentioned their injury troubles. They've had guys playing out of position. They've had forwards playing defense in training camp, and goalies playing forwards, and forwards playing goalies, and defensemen, playing as the officials. I'm being a little bit using a little bit of hyperbole here. So from the Jets' perspective, who could you see fitting in a different role for a fun sort of mid-training camp exercise?
Yeah, it's a good segment, I think, Drew, and an interesting
You're the one who
question.
suggested it, so yeah, well, I would think you would say that.
Thank you. We should mention to everyone listening, either live on YouTube or on the podcast, this came about, for those who don't know, because Sheldon Keefe announced that they might try Mitch Marner on defense. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look this up, I believe he did play a little bit of defense in their last exhibition game, or one of their exhibition games. So that's kind of what sparked this conversation. And when I brought this up, and I imagine a lot of people right now watching, the name that's going through their mind is Nikolai Ehlers, right? Like, Nikolai Ehlers is the best skater on the team, or at least one of the best skaters. He's definitely one of the fastest skaters. Jets definitely don't have a shortage of guys that can skate when you're talking about guys like Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, Josh Morrissey, the list goes on. But I mean, the guy that stands out to me for sure is Ehlers. And a lot of that has to do with skating, but also his vision and his passing ability. And I have no idea if Rick Bowness and the coaching staff are even considering this.
I can tell you they're not.
Well, I mean, obviously you talked to Rick Bowness this morning, Drew, but when you're talking about, the Jets lineup right now, like, I mean, we know there's a logjam on defense. So that would mean, you're possibly pushing another guy like Dylan Sandberg out of the lineup if you go with 6 defensemen, let's say. But, just for the sake of, conversation, I think Ehlers would be really interesting to see, as a defenseman, just because of his overall skating ability and skill set, right? So when you're talking about, how many times this has been done before, yes, Dustin Byfuglien used to be a forward, but he was a defenseman for the majority of his NHL career. But you go back and you look at a guy like Sergei Fedorov, or Dave will like this reference. Remember Matthew Dandino? He played forward and defense. There are guys. Brent Burns is another guy that's played forward and defense. But these guys are special, unique players. So let me qualify that. I'm not saying that I think Ehlers is going to be used as a defenseman. I'm just saying there is precedent for skilled players, the highest level of skilled players, when you're talking about Sergei Fedorov, a Hall of Famer. So Nikolai Ehlers is definitely a guy, that I would say is at the top of the list. And I think it would be really interesting to see, like, we know that he's a zone entry machine, right? And he's already going to be carrying the puck from his own zone. I just think it would be really interesting. He's also got a great shot. So Ehlers, for me, is at the top of the list. And also he's a good, responsible defensively, right? In terms of, defensemen that could play forward, what about a guy like Logan Stanley potentially playing on the fourth line, right? Like that's a guy that kind of, right off the top stood out to me as a guy that could possibly move to forward. But as you know, we're not most likely not going to see this. In terms of positionless hockey, I mean, the game has definitely changed. I mean, we know that the game seems to change every 3 to 5 years. So your traditional 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, 1 goaltender, I mean, that's not going to change. I think, the idea that to me is more interesting is how many teams around the league, especially with injuries and salary cap concerns, might consider, using one of their skilled forwards at defense. I think the another thing that needs to be brought up is, do you have concerns that, they might get more prone to injury with, defensemen blocking shots and just the different requirements of the position. But it's definitely an interesting topic. But I personally would love to see Nikolai Ehlers play a little bit on defense, even if it's only for, a period or one game.
Dave, same question.
Well, I mean, as he took the 2 best answers, so what do you want from me? I mean, what would I think the best would be? I think, Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor. Why? Because maybe you teach them how to play defense by having them go back there. Kyle Connor could definitely use some defensive proficiency. Mark Scheifele as well. So I think those two could perhaps benefit if we're talking about what would be the reason you do it. Maybe not in terms of their ability to defend, but maybe learning what it's like to, play defense. So that might be helpful for those kind of players. But look, I mean, if you're going to have this exercise, and I agree with Ezzy, it's fun. It's light. It's training camp, chatter. And I think that a guy like Nikolai Ehlers for sure, because of his skating, because of his ability, because of his vision, those are the reasons why. And yeah, I mean, Villian Heinola, I mean, he could be a crafty winger, perhaps, maybe give him a little bit of they flipped Villian Heinola over to the right side, turned him into a goon, got a penalty in Montreal. I don't know how much that's going to work. We'll see. They seem to like him. And one thing actually worth noting about Villian Heinola, although it's still about him as a defenseman, but he and Brendan Dillon were working quite late in practice together. So, I mean, maybe they are going to try and see if they can, make him a right side guy. We'll see about that. But no, I mean, look, the other obvious answer is a Logan Stanley, right? I mean, you want to talk about a big guy in front of the net, creating chaos. And I saw one of the comments already who said Logan Stanley already has enough chaos in his game. Okay, well, maybe you create a little chaos, a little havoc in front of the opposition net as opposed to in front of his own. So, I mean, like, it's funny. It's one of those, you really think about it from a forward's perspective. It has to be someone who can skate, right? It has to be someone. Blake Wheeler's a guy who maybe doesn't have the skating ability as he once had, but, he's fairly responsible defensively. And when he played center, he played it fairly well. So you can see, I mean, again, it would have to be someone who can skate, though. That's the only issue. You'd want to have someone who can really get back. So that's why Ehlers is a natural kind of top of mind when you think about something like that. But yeah, do I think that the NHL is going to do it? No, because the NHL is not really. I mean, the only way you're going to see it happen is if they have success, right? If the Leafs have success with something like this and it starts to work, well, wait a second. Maybe now you're more interested in trying it. Maybe other teams, because what is this league? This league is all about copying, right? It's a copycat league. So if one team sees this working for another, and then another tries it, and maybe it works for them, then maybe it happens. And maybe it's a way to get Nikolai Ehlers more ice time. Maybe it's a way to get, of course. I mean, I don't think the defense are going to like it very much. Suddenly, forwards are dropping back and stealing their ice time.
And a big consideration, guys, has to be you have to have the forward depth to be able to do this, right? Like if you're going to have one of your best skilled forwards, most skilled forwards, Mitch Marner, Nikolai Ehlers, William Nylander, by the way, is another guy that I think would be a candidate for this. Again, I'm not campaigning, for these guys to play defense. I'm just saying, like, we're having a conversation here. And so that, to me, that is something that the Jets don't necessarily have, right? Like the Jets top 6 is great. And we know that there's a lot of question marks on the 3rd or 4th lines, like who's going to take those last kind of 11, 12, 13th forward spots, right? Like Saku Manalainen, Sam Gagner, Mikey Esimont, David Gustafsson. I mean, David Gustafsson, Dave mentioned this off air. Like David Gustafsson's not going to play for the Moose this year. He's not waivers exempt. So David Gustafsson's going to be one of the Jets, I think, in the 13th forwards, top 12, whatever you want to call it, right? So, I mean, you have to have that depth, but it's just interesting. I think the Leafs are attempting to be a little bit creative here, but when you're talking about Mitch Marner, we know, the chemistry he has with Austin Matthews, and he's just, one of the most skilled forwards in the league. So if you're going to play him defense, you got to have someone else to take his role on whatever line you're talking about, right? So I by the way, don't think that Leafs are going to use him on defense a lot. If we do see it, I think it's going to be a very small sample size.
Let me ask you guys this, moving sort of shifting away from that fun conversation. In preseason so far, we've seen some unusual or some players playing on the PK, namely Mark Scheifele, that you would never see Mark Scheifele typically play on the PK. I don't necessarily expect to translate into the regular season, but we did see what happened with Kyle Connor once he became a regular on the Jets PK, and how dangerous he was, and how that sort of changed the dynamic of the penalty killing unit. Could you foresee a circumstance where something similar happens with a guy like Mark Scheifele, and it's more than just sort of the cup of coffee we saw in the preseason game so far?
I think so, and I think part of it is right now, I don't necessarily know that it's set in stone who your penalty killers are going to be, right? Like, we know Adam Lowry, I guess, would be the closest to that. But you don't have Andrew Kopp there, and you have other guys like Sam Gagner that can fill in. Kyle Connor, I think, will be a regular penalty killer for the Jets again, Dave. I don't see a reason why he wouldn't be with his skating ability and the fact that he can create turnovers. But yeah, Drew, I think, it did improve Connor's game. And by the way, Connor, still has a ways to go here. I mean, his defensive impact numbers, are not great. But I mean, the guy is a 50 goal threat. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's trying to turn him into, John Madden, former New Jersey Devil, or anything like that, right? So,
like the football coach, I was very. Yeah. You were talking about positionless hockey. You've really gone to positionless,
or defensive, whatever defensive forward you want to pick. I like Guy Carbonneau is my favorite one that I like to use, right?
Bob Gainey,
Yuri Lettinen, whoever you want to choose.
They're all people a little bit more relevant than your Devil's obsessive John
Madden.
That's
for 40-year-olds like us to talk about, Drew, right? But I think, look at Mark Scheifele. I know we got Haley Salvian coming up in about 5 minutes here, but I mean, Scheifele, I think it's captain obvious to say that he needs to be better defensively, right? And throwing him out on the penalty kill, that can't hurt. Like, I don't see that how that could possibly hurt. It would just make him, be able to work on his defensive side of his game in game, right? So again, we'll see, how much that happens. The other thing to consider is he's always going to be out there on the first power play, right, Drew? So if the Jets have, 4 or 5 power plays in a game, are you going to put him out there, Dave, and killing penalties because he's one of your top even strength players? So I do think it can help, but I just don't know how much he's going to factor into the penalty kill with other options that Rick Bowness has, namely, guys like Sam Gagner.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see it. I mean, you've got Lowry, you've got Gustafsson, you've got Gagner, you've got guys who are essentially PK specialists and who can eat pucks and not really have to worry about it. So I mean, you experimented with it, and we don't know, right? This is a whole new. You say, well, we saw this last year with Kyle Connor. That thinking is out the window, right? We don't know that it will be repeated because this is a new regime in charge. So it's hard to say exactly how Rick Bowness is going to use his horses, if you will. But no, I mean, I would think that you'd still buy, the kind of conventional thinking, go with guys who really can do that fairly exceptionally well, right? You don't
Jansen Harkins. Sorry, Dave. I always got in trouble for cutting you off. Jansen Harkins is another guy, and I think that could also give him more confidence and possibly bring out the offensive side of his game if he's a regular penalty killer.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what I said. Like those kind of guys, like I don't think you're gonna want to experiment too much and say, oh well, let's see how this works. I mean, if you're gonna experiment, you're gonna do it during the exhibition, right? You're gonna actually go heavy with it because now would be the time to try something. You don't really like to try new things in NHL games where it could burn you and cost you a playoff spot because, oh, hey, we tried this. Like, why would you try it during the NHL regular season? So conventional thinking is that you're going to use the guys who do that for a living, right? Like I said, Sam Gagners, the David Gustafsons, the Adam Lowrys, whether it's a Dominic Toninato or a Jansen Harkins, or even, like I said, if you want to throw Kyle Connor, but my expectation is they're not going to use a guy like Mark Scheifele in the PK role. Melanie, just hope that he can do more at 5-on-5 and the power play.
Yeah, I tend to agree with both of you. I don't expect it to become a regular thing, but in the preseason, when obviously your roster is much more in flux and you're less concerned necessarily about, especially early in the preseason, about allotting players directly in the roles that they think that they are going to play. I don't think it can hurt. I don't think for maybe give Scheifele that perspective a little bit more it allows him to maybe see the game or see aspects of the game that he hasn't previously been involved in, and see if that can carry over to impact his play at 5-on-5, where of course his defensive struggles are well documented. Just quickly, we talked about it with Mike, Rick Bowness coming out, criticizing the veterans for their shift length being over a minute in some cases. I thought it was a breath of fresh air. I thought it was refreshing to hear from him. And I think it really just goes and sort of shows even more so how under the previous coaching staff, both the Dave Lowry one, but I'm putting that one more to the side, and especially Paul Maurice, how the players were really running things way more than they look like they're going to be doing under Rick Bowness and under his leadership. And it's what I believe the Jets strongly needed. Your guys' thoughts on that quickly?
Yeah, I agree with you, Drew. It's another example of Rick Bowness putting the stamp on his team, right? He's put the stamp on his team throughout the 10 days or whatever, 10 days, 11 days of training camp so far, right? Mm-hmm. So, it is refreshing. You didn't hear, Paul Maurice, say that a lot, especially in his last few years as the Jets head coach, right? So it just goes to show you, how much more focused I think this entire coaching staff is, not just Rick Bowness, but, you throw in Brad Lauer and you throw in, Marty Johnston and you throw in Scott Arniel, right? So you like to see that. I mean, and that's what a coach should be doing, right? The coach should be, not just putting this out to the media, but, he should be, if the coach wants the shift lengths to be a certain length, that's a mouthful. He has to tell his players, now's the time to tell them, these players, not 50 games into the season, right?
Well, just to quickly add to that, the truth is, it's a couple things. Number one, he said, I'm not saying something to you guys for the first time that my players haven't heard. And the other thing is, because he's being honest, he's like, you guys are watching the games. You're seeing this stuff happen. I'm not saying something that your lying eyes aren't deceiving you. You're seeing the game, and he's treating, I think, the media with enough respect to say, I'm not going to try and sell you a sack of shit and tell you it's something else. And he's saying, I'm going to say what it is and what I'm seeing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I don't think he's calling the guys out in an aggressive manner. But I mean, if you watch the games, you can see these things transpiring. So I think he's just not going to try and redirect it. But as we know, if he is, the answer will be, we'll see.
Dave, you have to put $5 in the swear jar, by the way.
Okay. Take it out of my wallet. It's downstairs.
Haley Salvian of The Athletic is up next. Saturday morning, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Bottom of the hour, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show marches on as we approach 11 a.m. Haley Salvian of The Athletic set to join us. Hopefully she'll be able to jump on with us in a few minutes here. Dave Minuk is in the top right. Ezra Ginsburg, noted massive Toronto Blue Jays fan, is in the bottom middle. Certainly not jumping on a bandwagon or anything, as he is a huge fan of the Jays going back to
I don't watch every
Jesse
Jays
Barfield,
game.
Lloyd Mosby, Fred McGriff,
Dave
Rand
Steve.
Mullenix,
actually, the last Jays game, the last Jays game you were at, I believe, was in 2016 when we got to see Edwin Encarnacion bomb some, hit some major bombs in Toronto.
Dingers.
Yeah. No, it was actually it was a good game.
There you go. Well, the Jays obviously off to the playoffs, which are set to begin in a couple of days after the regular season winds up on Wednesday. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm, of course, in the finals of our fantasy baseball league, which is a very impressive accomplishment.
Nobody cares, Drew. Haley Salvian just texted me and said she was stuck in the rain with her dog. She's going to join us momentarily. So she's
here.
On.
So we can bring her in. Haley, first of all,
yes,
we need to see the dog.
Oh, he is okay. He's like under. I'm gonna.
Okay,
try
if it's too much work, I understand.
No. He's right beside me, and he's like under a towel. He's all wet still.
He's all wet still. That is. That's a very similar
pose.
So
is my hair.
So the hair, that's fine. It's the dog. Okay.
Yeah,
the dog
he's
is our
fine.
number one concern.
He's just laying under his towel now because he.
Does your dog like the rain, Haley? Like, I don't know. Some dogs hate it. I know, but. I imagine most of them don't like it.
He's not a big, he's not good. It's tough. So if I had a backyard, if I'm at my parents or I'm visiting or something and it's raining and we open the door for him to go outside, he refuses. But if it's the morning and it's his first walk and it's raining, he's going to go and do it because he needs to go outside. So I don't know. He's a hit or miss on the whole rain thing, but he's not happy right now is what I'll say. He's not having a nice time until he's fully dry. He'll be a little bit grumpy, which is why he's very moody, laying underneath a towel right beside me. So.
I also have a dog, Haley, and my dog is in a very similar pose. It has nothing to do with rain. It's just that she likes to spend a solid 22 and a half hours a day sound asleep, curled up in a blanket. So that's, a standard pose, very similar pose to what my dog is doing on most any occasion here.
It must be so draining to lay around all day.
It's very exhausting. I mean, I know that it's a hard life being a dog. It certainly
Absolutely.
is the case. It's sometimes a hard life for a reporter in the midst of the grind, I'll say, of training camp, where you sort of have exhausted a lot of the obvious stories, and now you're trying to make chicken salad out of some chicken bleep as you get closer and closer to the regular season, but you're in the bit of the doldrums. So let's try and pull ourselves out of the doldrums of the middle of training camp. Haley, from your perspective, as you cover, the entire league for The Athletic, and you look around, from, all 32 teams where hope springs eternal for some more than others.
Sure.
What is your sort of, what has been capturing your attention, I'd say, so far as you look around the various training camps?
I mean, it depends. Do you want to stick with Canadian teams or we
Sure.
open it up to everything? Because I do think there's some American teams that are really interesting to me.
Why don't we start with Canada then?
Yeah, absolutely. Because otherwise I'll just talk about the Detroit Red Wings or something for a half an hour. Because I don't know if it's because I just really like Max Boltman and I think he's an incredible writer, but I'm always fascinated with what's going on in Detroit. But I think in Canada, I do think some of the local beats that are more national stories right now. There are some Canadian teams who are kind of in that space. And I think the Calgary Flames and the Ottawa Senators are two really big ones that I think are very interesting right now. Obviously, having covered the Flames for the last 2 years, and I covered the Sens for 2 years as well. So I'm not trying to be biased here, but those are two of the teams. We always knew that the Calgary Flames offseason was going to be, the most consequential in the league. And we certainly saw that play out this summer. And I think now we're in this space of, okay, they're done shoveling all of the crap that came their way in the summer. They made all of the moves to, potentially make their team better or just minimize the damage. And now we're in the space of where is everybody going to fit? And I think those puzzle pieces are so interesting in Calgary right now. Who is going to be on the top line with Elias Lindholm? And you could assume that it's going to be Lindholm and Huberdeau on that top line. So who's going to be the one that slots in beside them and takes that opportunity? I thought in the preseason, not even preseason, sorry, in the offseason, one of the things I wrote about a lot was Tyler Toffoli being a really intriguing piece of that puzzle. Andrew Mangiapane is another one. He missed the start of camp with an injury, so Toffoli got runs in that first right wing slot. And he's a really interesting player. He's 6-time 20-goal scorer. Wasn't great in the playoffs last year, but I think we saw Toffoli maybe struggle with the fact that he wasn't playing with a center or another winger who could just get him the puck in the slot. And I think we've seen in whatever stop Toffoli's made in his career that if he's playing with somebody who can get him the puck in a high danger area, he's going to score goals. And that's what makes Tyler Toffoli really interesting on that top line with somebody like Jonathan Huberdeau. We've seen him make those passes and make those plays to guys who can finish them off. And Elias Lindholm can do the same. So that's a top of mind thing for me in Calgary, is looking at that. And then, moving down, who plays with Nazem Kadri. Daryl Sutter said, I believe it was yesterday, that wing spot still open, like no one's grabbed it. And we're talking Mangiapane coming back from injury. We're talking Sonny Milano on a PTO. You've got Dylan Dubé. You've got Jacob Peltier. You've got wingers in the Calgary organization right now who are kind of either fighting for a roster spot or fighting for a space in that top six. And I think that's really intriguing, where the new and the old kind of mesh, and the overarching question for the Flames that is really interesting to me is, did they do enough to make their team better? I think you can argue that they lost two of the best players in that deal, but I think you could also fairly argue that the Flames are going to be better when it matters because of the players that they added. So that's one. That's my rambling explanation about the Flames. I'm really curious about the Ottawa Senators. Again, they had a really big offseason. Alex DeBrincat, Claude Giroux, they're on power play 2 right now, which I think just speaks to the amount of talent and skill that roster has right now. Is Tim Stützle going to take another step? What's Josh Norris going to look like? What's Brady Tkachuk going to look like? I think we forget so often that Brady Tkachuk is still very young, despite the fact that he's just kind of a 20-goal scorer, power forward in the NHL, and now he's captain. So I'm very curious to see, can the Ottawa Senators actually take the step? Is the rebuild actually over in Ottawa? That's a really big one. The Winnipeg Jets are interesting too. I'm really curious to see what Rick Bowness does with the roster, with the way that they play. I know that there's Dallas fans who, I think you could ask media people, you could ask people around the team, you could ask fans about Rick Bowness, and I think their opinions are going to be very different. I covered the first round of the playoffs against the Stars last year, and that is a suffocating, irritating team. And I think that, he created such an environment that made anything in the middle, anything in the hard areas of the ice so difficult to get to. And then even if you get to the middle, you've got to face Jake Ottinger. And now we're going to look at this in Winnipeg with, okay, well, now if you can get through the middle, you've got Connor Hellebuck. So I'm really curious to see if he can make the Winnipeg Jets the most annoying team in the league. And I'm sure that there's going to be fans who are like, where's the high danger passes? Where's the fun and excitement? But then there's going to be opponents who are like, oh my God, I freaking hate this guy. And then there's the media people who are like, wow, Rick Bowness is so nice. Like, keep him around forever. I want to talk to him. So they're top of the list too. I'm really curious again, like is Winnipeg going to be irritating as hell while also still, being able to, I think the part with Dallas was they had this suffocating structure. They were really good in terms of not allowing a lot against, and again, Jay Gottinger, but they really only had one line that was clicking offensively. So I wonder, can the Jets mimic that kind of defensive structure? But they have more depth. You've got Ehlers and you've got Scheifele and you've got Kyle Connor. Like they should have more weapons offensively to be both suffocating but able to finish the chances that they get when they transition from defense to offense. So I'm not sure if all the pieces are there to make it work the same way. But I am really curious. I really want to see what the Winnipeg Jets look like at the halfway mark or something after, 40 games with Rick Bowness.
It's a lot of interesting points that you make there, Haley.
Yeah, I just talked for a while. I'm sorry.
No.
That's great. We can just take the rest of the show
left
off.
that
You keep
open-ended,
going.
Haley. He asked you to talk about, which teams were standing out to you. And when you talk about, being, like when you're talking about the Jets and being, more irritating to play against and annoying to play against, you mean that obviously in the best ways, because hopefully that results in wins. And I think a lot of Jets fans, hey, look, if the Jets make the playoffs, Jets fans are going to be happy. That's all you can ask for if you're a Jets fan right now, because they're not, one of the top Stanley Cup contenders. They're nowhere close to that. And if that ends up meaning they get 5 or 6 extra wins, that's what it's going to take, right? Like it's they're going to have to be in the high 90s to make the playoffs. So if they make the playoffs, and that means that some offensive numbers of guys like Scheifele, Ehlers, and Connor take a bit of a hit, I think most Jets fans will take that. I need to. You mentioned new and old. I got to bring it back to new because of course you've made the move to Toronto and you're now the national writer for The Athletic, and congratulations on that, by the way. And you've been covering the Leafs a little bit at training camp, and we were talking about the Rasmus Sandin contract, and right before you came on, we were talking about is there the potential for one of the Jets forwards to play on defense because of the news that Sheldon Keefe said he might use Mitch Marner on defense. Right. So I guess 2-part question: do you see Sheldon Keefe actually using Mitch Marner during a regular season game on defense? And second part of that question, how concerned are you with some of the injuries on the back end? Because a couple of ex-Jets, Jordy Ben and Carl Dahlstrom, who were brought in to be those 7th and 8th defensemen. I think Dahlstrom's out for the season, if I'm not mistaken. I think Jordy Ben's injury is a little bit less serious, but you've still got Jake Muzzin, who hasn't played a preseason game yet. I think he's expected back pretty soon. You would know better than we would, but what are your kind of overall thoughts on the Mitch Marner on defense and just overall the Leafs injuries on the back end?
Yeah, I mean, I think the injuries overall with the Leafs have been a little bit concerning, just with how many of them there are and the time that they're coming at all at once. I mean, John Tavares is out with an oblique injury. Pierre Engvall's out. I mean, Rasmus Sandin is back, as you mentioned. He signed. Jake Muzzin had a flare up with his back. Jordy Ben, as you mentioned, who's brought in to kind of be organizational depth. Okay, we got some injuries. Timothy Liljegren's out too with a sports hernia. All right, so we'll put Jordy Ben up, and he's, we're confident in what Jordy Ben can bring. Maybe if he has to play, and now Jordy Ben's out and Dahlstrom, so it's been not great. I think Rasmus Sandin coming back is important, obviously. I'll be curious to see if he lost a step after missing some training camp. Obviously he missed the first week. I guess there's about 8 days left in camp. So how quickly can he get up to speed? And is Rasmus Sandin ready to take on, a top 4 role? Because we did kind of see him playing around 16 minutes a game and about a, third pair-ish role. Is he ready to play 20 minutes a night on a contender in the NHL is a big question mark. So I think there is probably concerns over the injuries with the Leafs right now. I think when it comes to the question about like forwards playing defense. I think it's kind of funny. I'm not sure if Sheldon would, start a game with Mitch Marner on like the second pair or something like that. But I'd be kind of curious if he would get Marner set up in the sense that he could like run the point on a power play or something. Could Mitch Marner be the power play quarterback and be in that defensive slot? And if they lose the puck at the blue line, can he go back and be okay defensively in that space? Like that would be an interesting thing to me. I know Kelly Yarncroke moved back and played defense in the preseason game, and he's such a good defensive player that it was just like, all right, just do what you do as a forward, but be a defender now. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think I'm always curious of new different things in the league. The positionless player, if you will, is kind of cool and fun to think about, but I don't know if I want to see Mitch Marner as, a number one defenseman. I think he's a pretty good winger. Because that's the thing, like if Marner's on the back end, like who's playing on the top line and who's going to be up there making plays? Is it still Mitch Marner? Is he just the offensive defenseman now? And Morgan Riley is the anchor trying to get back on defense if they lose the puck. I don't know. It's fun to think about, though. I'm not trying to be the thief of joy here.
No, that's Mindell. He's the thief of joy.
That's
Don't worry
my
about
job.
that.
Yeah. Haley Salvian, our guest here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, Saturday morning, about 10:45.
Haley, one of the things you just did a Q&A with Jack Campbell, the Oilers' new goaltender, and one of the things we're seeing, I think, is more interesting journalism again, and we're allowed back in the room. Which obviously with the pandemic has been excluded to the media. Are you looking forward to it selfishly from a journalistic perspective to be able to get those fun stories again, get the interesting, the Zoom, have the Zoom era be the Zoom, in the past, and have that ability to have those dialogues, have those interactions, because so many people ask us questions. And I said, quite frankly, we're not in the room anymore. So we don't see it. We don't know it. We don't really get to experience it the way we did when you'd be in the room, especially after a practice, when things are light, guys are different, you have more interaction. Whereas now you're kind of, I'm not saying it's going to be 100% back the exact same way as it was, but I just think, like, I just was reading your Q&A and I just thought it's fun, it's interesting, it's light, and it's not something we've seen over the last couple of years because there's been that separation.
Yeah. You know what? I think it's really, it's a good question. And I think I obviously want to preface it with, I'm so grateful. Like, there's way worse stuff that could happen during a global pandemic than, getting out of the locker room for me and my job. I still had a job the whole time. I'm covering the NHL. I'm very grateful for that. But it was a really difficult time to be able to do the job the way that I really like doing it, which is doing features, which is getting to know people. I will say, I think, the lack of access made me a better analyst. I think in my first year in Ottawa, I didn't have the confidence to talk about what was wrong with the power play. I didn't really have the confidence to write a column about, why the Calgary Flames need to do X. Like, I think it made me stronger with my voice as an analyst in the sport because I couldn't focus on, okay, well, I just had this really great conversation with Nick Paul and I'm going to write a story about him as a human being. So it made me more well-rounded, I would say, as a media member, which it's great. But I still feel like some of my best work as a writer in the way that I like to do this was in Ottawa, which was 3 years ago before the pandemic started. And I think, in Calgary, there were some guys I got to know because we had phone calls or we'd bump in the hallway and have a couple conversations. I never introduced myself to Johnny Gaudreau. I didn't meet Matthew Tkachuk. I don't know Sean Monahan. And I covered this hockey team for 2 years. And I didn't have any face-to-face experience with the most important, best players on the team. I did a feature on Andrew Mangiapane because I got him over the phone in the summer, and that was great. And Flames PR was really good at getting you one-on-ones when things were a bit more open. So, I talked to Rasmus Anderson or Blake Coleman. I got to know some of these people, but it's different because you're getting someone pulled out for a one-on-one. You want to get to business. You got to use your time wisely. You do the interview, whatever. Whereas in the locker room, you can go over on a day and just say, hi, Rasmus, my name's Haley. It's nice to meet you. Like, you can talk to people as human beings. And I think that was something that was really lost during the pandemic. And that's the one thing about Calgary. There's so many people in that room and people in that organization that, you know, you'd love to get to know, to be able to share their story in a different way. So you need to get to know them. They need to trust you to tell their story too. I think that's the other side of this is, sure, I could have requested Johnny Gaudreau for a big feature about being newly married and he's got a baby on the way, but Johnny Gaudreau doesn't know me. Why would he want to talk to me about that? Like, how does he know he can trust me, that I can share his story? And I think that's, you know, something that was lost with the pandemic. And I'm really excited to be able to change that and do, you know, not, you know, continue analyzing the game, continue talking about what the Jets need to do to win or what the Flames need to do to win, what's wrong with the power play, but also get back to like sharing stories of these human beings, like these people, and doing that kind of good journalism as well, because that's been missed in terms of my day-to-day for sure.
Haley, when the season starts, you know, inevitably, you know, people are sketching out who they think they're going to be their playoff teams. And there's always a dark horse. There's always a team that comes out of nowhere and ends up being a playoff team. Last year, I think in the West, there'd probably been the Los Angeles Kings. I don't think anybody had the Kings earmarked as a playoff team, you know, and then obviously they went on and had a very successful playoff run, unexpected playoff run, obviously losing, but, you know, still getting pretty far. You know, who's that team from your perspective? Today, you know, if you're sitting here, if you had to sort of circle a team that could be that dark horse, who do you have in mind?
That's a really good question. I think if you're thinking of a team in a dark horse sense that like maybe didn't make the playoffs last year that could make a push this year, like I'm kind of lean like maybe could Ottawa make the playoffs? I think, you know, what can the Islanders do with Lambert as the coach? Was last year just a horrible year? And I feel like it doesn't even, I don't know, saying the Islanders is a bit strange because they were a playoff team for a while. But last year was just such a disaster for them. They just couldn't tread water long enough. Like, it just seemed like they started 400 meters back from the starting line. So maybe Islanders are one I'll throw out there. I feel like I always try to think of this in the sense of like, okay, what do the divisions look like? You know, maybe what does everything look like there? Like, is there a division that might take a step back? Are there teams that, you know, might be able to take advantage of a team, you know, being bad? And I think that's where, like, I don't know what the Bruins are going to look like this year. They've got a lot of talent. But are they going to be able to tread water? Well, Grzelcyk and Marchand and McAvoy are hurt. Can they, or are they going to tread water and be okay? Or are they going to be the New York Islanders from last year where it's just, oh gosh, this isn't going well? They'll still have Pasternak in the lineup and stuff like that. So we'll see. But I think I look at Ottawa, you know, I think Detroit is interesting. I don't know if they're quite there yet. I feel like they're maybe, you know, a piece away from being a playoff contender. I'd be interested to see if Detroit can make the playoffs, if the Islanders, the Senators. I like the LA Kings. I don't think Anaheim. I don't think San Jose. I'm trying to like run through it in my head really quickly here. The Devils, like their goaltending was just so bad last year that if like Vanacek and Blackwood can be like just mediocre, will the Devils be able to make some noise? That's another curious one for me because they've got some talent. I think Heischer's hurt, but I'm a big Jack Hughes believer. So maybe the Devils too. I don't know. I didn't answer your question.
That's okay. It's still training camp for everybody.
I think you answered it really well. I mean, I think, you know, Haley, when you're talking about Detroit and Ottawa, I mean, there's no doubt they improved the most, especially considering they were bottom 10 teams in the league. But in that division, you mentioned the Bruins, and even with all those injuries, that's one of the teams that you're going to have to beat out in that division, right? So can Detroit do that? Can Ottawa do that? I mean, when you're talking about Andrew Kopp and David Perron in Detroit, I mean, those are huge upgrades.
was one of my favorite players this off. He was on the top of all my lists. Sorry, the dog is coming.
Well, okay. In that case, let's see the dog, and then we'll let you go and get on with the day. You probably got to blow dry the dog at this point.
He's
What kind of dog is it? Oh my! Is that
Frenchie.
What's your dog's name?
His name is Bono, and he's sitting right in my lap, not even knowing what's happening right now. If you guys have another question, that's all right. I was late, so
no, it's all good. We got to wrap at 11. My kids have been my wife's out of town, and my kids have been running amok by themselves for the last.
Who does Bono think I should take in my hockey pool this year?
What position are we talking about here? What do you mean?
Any position, forward, defense. Does he have a few sleeper picks maybe?
Bono really likes Elias Lindholm. He's not really a sleeper pick, though. I don't know. Bono doesn't watch hockey.
Is Bono are you a big U2 fan? Is that the origins of the name?
No. Everyone asks me that, though. It would be kind of no. I do have one friend.
Drew, that's such an obvious question. Jeez.
No, I get it all the time. I do have one friend who every time he sees Bono, he scolds him for putting that album on his iPhone.
Yeah.
Get it? Not the real Bono, my dog Bono.
I get it.
Yeah, I will never forgive the real Bono for that either. Why did you put that on my phone?
Well, Haley, having you on today is even better than the real thing.
Yeah,
very nice.
Well, yeah, he's never done this to me before on a video podcast before. He just really didn't care.
That's all good. He wants TLC. We'll let you get on with that.
I'm gonna come sit down with you.
Haley Salvian is the National Hockey
Stay dry.
of the NHL for the Athletic. Haley, thank you. Bono, thank you. We'll let you get back to mom right now.
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
it. Thank you. There she goes. Haley Salvian joining us to wrap up the show on this Saturday morning.
She's got to wrap up Bono.
Well, more dogs. That's our policy here on the program, and that leads us
to smash
up.
The like button. That's our policy. Make sure you smash that like button. Yep. Leave comments on the social medias if you can, and also if you can on the wherever you download the podcast. We always appreciate if you can leave some sort of whether it's a criticism, i.e. Dave M has interrupted too much, or something positive. You love the show. Whatever you need to do.
I'm thinking, guys, we might need to have a best of guests with dogs show, because remember we had Eric Comrie on. He was still a member of the Jets organization at that point. But remember his dog, I forget, it was named after a Star Wars character or something. From his house in California. You remember, Drew? He had his dog on. And then remember back in the TSN 1290 days, we had Chase DeLeo on, who was a member of the Jets Moose organization at that point. I remember he had a dog named Chase Jr. So maybe we can have a show of just our guests and their dogs.
I can bring Brixton. Jay Bell can bring Marty Bird, his parrot.
No, only dogs, Drew.
Only dogs? Okay, fair enough. You drive a hard bargain. I want to say thank you to our sponsors. They make the show a possibility. They make the website a possibility. They make the upcoming post-game show 13 days away. Friday, October 14th, the first Illegal Curve Hockey Show post-game show. Put it in your calendar.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
You're ready, then you're going to tell us you're bailing on the show an hour before it begins.
What?
We know how it works.
No. Absolutely not. Opening night, first regular season of the game. I'll be doing all 82 post-game shows this year, Drew.
We both know that's not the least bit accurate or the least bit true. And if that was to be the case, it would result in you being, i.e., either murdered or divorced, one or the other, and possibly both. Betway, our friends at Betway, they sponsor the game recap on the post-game show. They're one of the most trusted voices in sports betting, both in Canada and all around the world. We thank them. Our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. Mark Forward is in town. He's been playing to sold-out shows. 2 shows tonight, but they're both sold out. You missed out on your opportunity. Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, as I mentioned, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, Grid Park, and our friends at The Keg support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. Big thanks to Mike McIntyre for joining us in hour number 1 with a great interview. Big thanks to Bono and Haley Salvian for joining us here in hour number 2. Dave M will have the show available for download coming up within the hour. It's also available on our website, illegalcurve.com.
Except last week, Drew, where I inadvertently didn't do it till the next day.
Okay, well, we'll let that pass. We'll give you a pass there. It's a new year, Dave. At least in the Jewish calendar, so you can start off fresh in that sense. And of course, you got a game. Start. Yeah, you got a game preview.
So far, so good, Drew.
Both of you, shut up. You got a game preview prior to the Jets and the Oilers, and of course,
just posted on
illegalcurve.com. So Dave will have a full recap later on tonight. You can follow our Twitter feed at Illegal Curve for coverage of tonight's game as well. Ezra Ginsburg is in the bottom middle getting ready for the Jays. Let me ask you this there, Ginsburg, big bandwagon baseball fan. Do you know who the Jays are playing tonight?
Yeah, they're obviously playing the
Red
Rays.
Sox.
Red Sox, Ginsburg.
No,
Red Sox.
No, I knew it started with an R. Look at. I'm ready to go here. Like before we wrap up here, because we've got a few seconds. I just love Aaron Judge hits his 61st home run and the guy can't squeeze it. And I don't know how much that ball would have been worth. And maybe it's kind of meant to be that he dropped the ball. But I just find that so funny. Not only one guy, two guys had a crack at it. So I'm one of those guys that loves people that bring baseball gloves, especially if you're sitting there to the game. Some people don't like, people that bring baseball gloves. They think it's nerdy or something, but I just thought that was funny. 61st home run, breaks Roger Maris's record, and the guy can't squeeze it. Just awesome.
If you remember in 2014, we all wish we would have brought a baseball. Not you.
Shout out to Drew and Chase Utley.
I was going to say, no, actually, I shouldn't say that. I said Drew and I should wish we brought gloves because you and Huss were already long gone. You guys were in the
the home run ball went off Drew's head. His big.
You guys went to and Dan, our boy Philly Dan went to the Xfinity Center while Rich, Drew, and I stayed. And Chase Utley's 14th inning, mile high home run, which I got the hell out of the way for because I'm like, I'm not breaking anything. Trying to get this thing landed like a foot of the way from Drew. And then we, of course, have the evidence to prove it. So
the best was after the game. The best was, I still remember after the game. Hey, you're the guy that the baseball went off of his head.
It ricocheted off the seats behind us and then pegged me off.
Let me tell you, all I know is, well, first of all, a couple of things. The sound of the ball hitting the metal stanchion was like, it was like a bomb had gone off. That number one. Number two, again, I give Drew credit because I've never seen a grown man leap for a ball the way Drew leaped for the ball. Well, I should say grown man, I know, but leap for
Drew's
the ball.
Drew's little penguin legs were moving.
Oh, yeah, he went for it while we were kind of stood there laughing. And then, of course, thirdly, the best was the dude who we bumped into after, who was like I took a picture of the guy who was holding the ball.
I was going to say, don't we have a picture somewhere in the Illegal Curve archives?
I do.
Drew
I do. Of the guy. Yeah, Drew with the guy who actually got the ball, and then also the person we met afterwards who knew Drew, who recognized Drew as the guy who missed the home run ball.
Yeah, my fat lip on full display after getting it in the
bodysuit guy.
Goodbye, boys. We'll see you goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Download the podcast in case you missed any of the show. We'll see you next Saturday and, of course, all week long on illegalcurve.com.